Welcome to Widowed Too Soon, where real-life widows and widowers come together to share their stories of survival, faith, and the journey of finding hope in the darkest of times. Whether you're newly widowed or have been on this journey for some time, each week we're here to provide you with inspiration, practical advice, and the reassurance that you are not alone. You were made to not only survive, but thrive. And now here's your host, a woman who has walked this path herself, who finds solace in writing, joy in speaking, and freedom in dancing like nobody's watching. Bader Ebersole.
Welcome to Widow Too Soon. This is Bader Ebersole. I'm so excited to be coming back with another guest. And this time we have a widower, which we have way less of those. So I'm super excited to bring to you my new friend, John Yoder. John, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Michelle. How you doing?
I'm good. And you're coming from, what city did you say? Something, South Carolina.
Aiken, South Carolina.
Aiken, South Carolina. And I hear the accent, even though you don't think you have one. But, coming from Washington, I can pick up that Southern accent.
Okay.
Did you grow up in South Carolina?
No, I grew up in East Central Illinois.
All right, that's what you just said, that
Right.
you grew up there. So I'm super excited to hear your story. I know you sent it to me, but I honestly did not review it right before we got on here. So it's going to be, news to me to hear your whole story. So thank you for applying to be here and being a listener and all the things and being willing to let God use your story, because it is like nerve-wracking the first time you go on a podcast and you're like, oh, what am I doing? But I know that God is going to use what you have to say. So let's get started with, tell us about how you met your wife and your love story with her.
Okay. And first of all, I want to say my wife's name is Twyla. And so,
I love that.
yes,
it's a beautiful name.
It is. And this story began back in '88
Okay.
when I was 19 years old.
Mm.
And so I had a friend of mine that his girlfriend, which is now his wife, was working in Virginia at a nursing home, and
Okay.
so this nursing home, and what they do is they still run it today. They do you go there as young people go there as a volunteer service, and they kind of like they didn't pay they don't pay a lot to the people because
Right.
they're to volunteer to take
Right.
care of the elderly, and you become
Okay.
orderlies, CNAs, and you take care of the people. So he'd asked me if I'd go with him because his girlfriend was working there, and we were going to go there and work around the and clean
Nice.
up for a week and stuff. And so I said, sure, I'll go. And so on the way there, he was telling me about this young lady that her name was Twyla, and he said that my girlfriend thinks you need to meet her. And I said, oh, okay, well that's neat. Sure, I will. I'll. And so I was, we were there and we were in a meeting, and I saw her across the room, and I was like, oh, yeah, she's cute, and didn't talk to her till on Monday when I was sweeping floors and cleaning up the place, and she came around and she started talking, and she had this Southern accent, and I was just like, oh man, and I was like, wow, she is a nice lady, and nice young lady, and so this is a little story that she wouldn't want me to share on the podcast, but I used to just because if she was going around and just she's very friendly, very outgoing, and I was just she came around and she was giving out chocolate kisses to everybody,
Cute.
just being friendly. And so I
Yeah.
used to tell people over the years that she gave me a kiss the first time I talked to her,
Oh,
and she would
funny.
always be like, stop it," because
Uh-huh.
because that's not at all who she was,
Yeah.
in that sense. But as far as she was just being friendly, and
Yeah.
doing it. And so when I was there, I was actually kind of awestruck at the first time I ever met
Oh, I
her,
love
ever
that.
talked to her, and I was like, oh man, I got to get to know this young lady. And
Mm-hmm.
so they actually had an opening for an orderly at that place, and so I applied, and they took me, and that was in October that I met her first, and by the end of November, right after Thanksgiving, which had been about just 88, whatever that, how many years ago that's been a while back. So,
Yeah.
uh, so that anniversary just came when I went out actually and began working as an orderly. And so we got to work together for several months, and we started dating actually while we were at the still working at a nursing home. She
Oh,
went
I
home in
love
March,
it.
and I stayed till the following
Can
November.
I ask what an orderly is? I don't actually
Oh,
know.
it's like a CNA that
Oh.
takes care of the men.
Oh, okay. I just
Yes,
didn't know that
yeah.
term.
At
Okay.
least that's what we called them back years ago. So I don't know. I
Yeah.
guess they still do. But so that was our job, is to take care of the elderly men.
Yeah.
And I became a CNA, and was doing that for that year. And so what I don't know if I ever finished, but so the money that we didn't get paid a lot, but we had
Right.
housing and all our food and all that,
Oh,
and
nice.
so basically we were taken care of, except for the money that we didn't make that they normally would pay an orderly or a CNA, for
Yeah.
that service. The money they didn't pay us, they sent off to missions, and
Oh,
so
I love that.
that was kind of why we were there, is to be able to give our time so they could send the money to missions that they were making off of the nursing home.
Wow.
And
That's
so my wife
amazing.
and I often joked about that we did the nursing home part first instead of
Right.
last. And
Yeah, that's funny.
so that's where so people would ask us where you met. I say, well, we met in a nursing home. And everybody like, in a nursing home,
What?
it was just
Yeah.
kind of one of those jokes that we had
Right. So you met
but,
there, and then how long did you date before you got married? What was that like?
we dated for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And I so we started dating like in March of '89, and then by no, I take that back. We met in '87. Okay,
Okay.
back up. '87. We started dating in March of '88, and then in May of '89, May 25th of '89, I proposed to her, and that's kind of a funny story there.
Yeah, we'd love to
Uh,
hear it. I like
okay.
proposal stories.
So I had all this plans. We went out to eat in a really nice restaurant, and we went to these beautiful gardens in Orangeburg, South Carolina. And anyway, there was this bridge that I crossed nice water and stuff. And then I was planning on, when we get to that bridge, is when I was going to propose to her. Well, we got to that bridge, and there were some people just wouldn't get off the bridge, and it was getting dark, and you're supposed to be out of there by dark. And so
Mm-hmm.
finally I was like, these people just won't leave, and I didn't want to do it right there when all strangers were around.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I was bummed out, and so we left, and I was like, I got to figure out something different. And so we actually went. Told her, I said, would you like to go to the lake and
Mm.
just sit beside the lake, and we'll grab some coffee. And so we were sitting beside the lake, and I was drinking my coffee, and she was kind of making fun of the way I was drinking my coffee, and just we're just having,
Yeah.
just talking. And then I proposed to her, and she was like,
Oh.
"Do you know what you just said to me?" And I said, "Absolutely." And she said, "Yes, I'll marry you."
Oh,
And
that's
so
sweet.
anyway,
I love
um,
that. So then when
yeah,
did you get married?
we got married on November 24th
Mm.
of '89. It was the day after Thanksgiving.
Oh, okay.
And her parents used to own a restaurant, and so they were usually closed over the Thanksgiving holiday. So we were going to get married on Saturday after Thanksgiving, but then there were some friends of ours that wanted that date, and so we took Friday. And so
Oh, that's nice of
uh,
you.
back then when we got married, there weren't a whole lot of Friday weddings
Right.
uh, because people just had the Saturday, and we didn't want to do it the following Saturday because of the restaurant and all. So yeah.
Right. I actually, when I married Luke, it was a Friday,
Oh, was it?
because it was way cheaper on a
Oh,
Friday than a
yes.
Saturday. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, I see that now a lot more.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we actually did a Friday as
Yeah.
well. So you got married, and then what
Mhm.
was life like then? Did you have kids right away?
Uh,
Were you guys working? What were you doing?
right. Yes, I was working, and she was working at the restaurant as a waitress.
Okay.
And so yeah, we started our life together in a little single wide trailer, and
Mm-hmm.
and this is kind of a neat thing that I like to talk to people, young people about is when we came home from our honeymoon, we had like $250 to our name.
Oh my goodness.
And we had a payment for our trailer that was like $211.17. I don't remember a lot of
Wow.
things, but I remember that
Remember
number.
that? Yeah.
And so, we started out like that, and I like to tell people that you can make it, when you're, even though you have small means, you can still make it. And
Yeah.
you got love and you got each other, and you're going to be okay.
Yeah. Oh,
But anyway, yeah, we were working, and then we had our first, we had a miscarriage first. And so I'll never forget that day. That was the
yeah.
hardest thing we had ever walked through at that moment.
Right.
And I remember coming home, and I saw right away something was wrong. And so we worked through that, but then before we knew it, she was actually pregnant with our first child, which was our daughter. And so that was probably, I think we were married 2.5 years, maybe something like that. 92, so whatever that, 3 years, about 3 years. And so we had her, and then we had a son 5 years later, and then another son 5 years later.
Oh, so yours are kind of spread out.
Right, ours were spread out. That's just the way the Lord orchestrated it. And so, yeah, Jessica, John, Christopher, and Chandler. So.
Oh, nice. I like those names.
Yep.
So you had your 3 kids, life was good.
Yeah.
What was like a typical like weekend? Like what would you guys do?
Oh, well, we go to church on Sunday, of course, but that's what our typical. But if we had, we love to, we'd go on hikes sometimes. We would, when some, of course, anniversaries, we always went off for our anniversary. Had different anniversary weekends. Cabo San Lucas one
nice.
time. That was like one of the bigger ones we done, but we always made sure we went off for our anniversaries.
Yes, it's
and
important.
and as the children got older, the boys did baseball, and that was a big highlight during that part of our marriage and stuff. So, but yeah, I got involved in doing a prison ministry then. She went with me some. Her and I went to, we traveled to Russia. And my daughter went with me one time. So we did some mission things. And then as we got, the children got older, we got into, we were youth leaders at our church. For about at least 6. Well, really early on, we were youth leaders for like a year or so, but then later on, after I think our daughter might have been like 16 or so, 17, 18. I don't exactly remember anymore, but we became youth leaders for quite a while then.
Right.
So, yeah.
And then life continued, and your kids, they move out, get married.
Yeah, my daughter's married, and she got married in 2019, and we have and just since my wife passed away, since she passed away, I have a grandson now. So, and then just last April, my son got married. And so I still have the youngest son, Chandler. He's still living here at home. So.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's kind of transition to tell me about when your life changed with your wife.
Okay. So something that we did every year was camping on Labor Day with friends of ours. And so we were camping, and we're getting ready to come home, and her dad calls me and says that I think we have COVID.
Okay.
And so
what year was this? I'm just
that'd have been in 21.
Okay, so still COVID was very big thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, it was October of 21.
Okay.
And so I talked to him on the phone. I said, well, we'll be home, here in an hour or so, and we'll come check on you. And so by that time, two of my daughter-in-laws had, not daughter, I'm sorry, my sister-in-laws had showed
Sister-in-laws.
up
Okay.
to help as well. And so they went down to talk to my in-laws just to see how they're doing. And came out on the porch and just sat there and talked to them, outside, just so trying to stay,
Right.
as clear as we could. And so when my dad-in-law got up to go inside, he fell
Oh.
and he couldn't get up anymore. And so we didn't realize how weak he had become.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, the three girls, ladies tried to pick him up and they just couldn't. So they called me and said, "Would you please come down and help?" And so I went in and helped get him to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And so that went on for probably close to 2 weeks, maybe week and a half, something like that. And we're trying to do different things, that's a whole nother aspect of, trying to, there were so many different things that
Right.
people said, do this, do that, don't do
Oh yeah.
this,
Uh-huh.
all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's got their own story that we all went
Right.
through with that. But so one evening, he just got so bad that called him. I called the ambulance, and they came and picked him up, and so he went to the hospital, and then it was, I think it might have been like 2 days later, something like that, that my wife and her sister started getting sick,
Mm.
and so we brought my wife home, or we stayed home while another sister-in-law of mine was there taking care of Mama, my mother-in-law, and while my dad-in-law was in the hospital. And so we started doing different things. I'd call my brother-in-law and say, "Hey, how are you taking care of your wife? And let's compare and see how
Yeah.
they're doing together and all that." And uh, and so we do that to try to say, "Well, she's doing that. Okay, well that sounds about right." And I had actually my daughter worked for uh, a company that did kind of more of a natural, they
Mm-hmm.
had sold more natural things or whatever. And that lady was trying to help me to say, well, this is what I've been
Right.
researching. If you do this, this will work for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started just taking care of her. And, you know, while I was doing that, I felt like I'm doing exactly what I promised I would do, is I'm going to take care of her in sickness
Yep.
and in health, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to do this for her. And it's and the whole time, of course, we were praying for her. And at then my daughter wanted to come help, and I was like, I don't want you to get sick, honey. Just,
Mm-hmm.
if I get sick, then you'll need to come probably. But for now,
Yeah.
let me try to do this. And I was asking a lot of questions. Finally, I started asking, calling around to different doctors to see if I could get her in. And a lot of them would be like, well, she's a new patient. And this is the thing that had happened. She had a doctor, but the doctor had just retired.
Oh no.
And she was in the process of finding another doctor,
Right.
a family doctor that she could
Right.
go to. But she hadn't found one yet. So I tried to email her doctor that had retired to see if I could get an email. Well, the email never came back till later that, yeah, I could do something or whatever. But it was too late by then. But so I called these different doctors, and they are all saying, well, she's a new patient, so can't see her till 2 weeks from now, or I'm not taking new patients. And,
Right.
it's just a lot of that, what we know about COVID, how it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so uh, finally it got to where I was I said, she just seems to really be getting sicker. I said, I think I need to do something different.
Yeah.
And so my daughter came, and we took her to uh, it's like I forget what you call them now, uh, where you just go in, and you don't have to have an appointment.
Oh, urgent care?
Urgent care. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. For some reason I
That's
couldn't think of that.
okay.
But went to an urgent care, and they right away said, well, she needs to go to the hospital.
Oh wow.
And so, and actually, back up a little bit, the day that I did that, it was the day her dad passed away.
Oh no, from
Yeah, her
COVID?
dad, right. So he passed
Oh,
away that day in the hospital. And so she was so sick that she couldn't really process,
oh,
you
yeah.
know,
And what kind of sick? I know it was COVID. Was it like coughing or like what
right.
symptoms did
It,
she
it
have?
it got in her
Her
lungs,
lungs.
yeah,
Okay.
and coughing and Michelle, I had there was times when like I remember one time I was taking care of her, I mean checking her oxygen level, and it went way down like in the 80s. And
Mm,
I was like, "Oh, I got this. I got to do something about this."
yeah.
And I just leaned over her and I said, "Jesus, she needs your oxygen." And
Mm.
kid you not, that it went up like that to 97.
Wow. That's
Just like,
amazing.
yeah, it did. It was just like, oh, and I was like, oh, God's got this.
Right.
And I even told friends of mine, I said, we need to stop asking God to heal her. Let's start thanking Him for the healing,
Mm,
because I was just so convinced that this is what's going to happen to her.
right.
And I know you know some of that
Yeah.
story as well, and
Hmm.
everybody that's listening, a lot of people
Yes.
that are listening anyway that do. So anyway, and then one night she had a real high fever, and I called her family and said, "Would you please pray for her? She's got a high fever." And I went into my den and just turned on worship music, and I just got on my knees and I just started praying and worshiping. And about 15, 20 minutes later, I went in to check her temperature and it was normal.
Wow. And that's
And so
before the hospital?
that's before the hospital,
Okay.
yes. So now I go back to the day we took her to the
Yeah.
hospital. We took her in, and of course I couldn't go in with her other than just right to
Right.
the emergency room. And so I was took her in. They said they'll take her from here and take care of her. Her oxygen level was not too bad. Her vitals were pretty good, but she just had trouble breathing. And so we left, and I told them, please call me, have the doctor call me, and so we can. They said, well, they'll admit her and everything. And so I was waiting on a phone call, and I just couldn't. They wouldn't. I finally called in, and I said, well, I'd like for them to do this treatment rather than that treatment, and they didn't want to do it. But I said, well, have the doctor call me, and I want to talk to him. And so they didn't call.
Mm.
And so I was so tired by this time that I couldn't hardly stay awake, because I had been for 2 weeks just, you know,
Yeah.
plus just worrying about her, and I was wore out. And so my daughter took my phone and said, look, when they call, I'll talk to them. If I need you, I'll wake you up. And so I went to sleep.
Hmm.
And so the next morning at, I remember that it was 7:08, they got a phone call, and it was my wife. It was Twyla on the phone, and she was like, "Would you please come get me?"
Mm.
And I was like, "Honey, you're sick. I can't. Why are you? Aren't they taking care of you?" And she said, "No, they're not taking care of me."
Wow.
And she said, "I said, where are you at?" And she said, "I'm sitting in the waiting room, or the lobby area of the emergency room." And so I was like, "Well, that don't sound right."
Right.
I said, "Why are you?" She said, "Well, come get me. Come get me." I said, "Well, we'll be there." So it took me an hour. It was about an hour away. So I went there, and I saw her sitting there. Just, I mean, she was so sick. She hardly knew what was going on.
Why was she there? Why wasn't she in a room?
Well, then that's where I asked. I said, uh, I asked the lady at the front. I said, "Why is my wife sitting here instead of in a room?"
Yeah.
And she said she wants to go home.
Oh.
I said, well, sure, she wants to go home, but I
Right.
said, she doesn't really know what's going on.
Uh-huh.
And she said, well, we asked her what her kids' names, what the, children's names are, and what your name is, and she said what it was. And so this is not a prison.
Mm.
We need to let her go.
Wow.
And anyway, there's been a lot of stuff that I
Yeah.
had to do. And
Mm-hmm.
she was like, well, bring her back in. And I said, no, I said, I'll take her to the hospital, but it won't be here.
Yeah, I wouldn't after that. Mm-mm.
Right. And so we left and took her to the hospital here closer to home. And she actually has at the time, there was a cousin of her that used to work there. And
Mm.
so we was trying to, or no, she didn't work there, but she knew somebody that worked there. And so we was trying to get some help there that way. And so she was in the hospital then for about 2 weeks.
Oh,
We
wow.
we Yeah, we took her in on a Wednesday, and she passed away 2 weeks later on a Wednesday. But we had postponed the um, the funeral for her dad, and thinking that she'll be coming home. We
Right.
postponed it for like 10 days, and then it was on October 2nd. Um, so then the friend, or I mean, her cousin that had a friend that worked at the hospital was able to get me actually into the hospital for to watch the funeral over live stream.
Okay. Did you have to
So,
sneak in?
well, just about.
Yeah.
But they worked it out with the nurses. The head nurse saw me, and I went in there with roses, and I was,
Mm.
you know, I was so I couldn't wait to get in there to see her. And
Yeah.
the nurse was the head nurse was like, "I'll let you be here for till noon, which would have been like 3 hours." And I looked at her and I said, "Do what?" I said, "I don't know if the funeral's even going to be over by then. Can't you do better or something?" And she looks at me and she goes, "It'll be good for her and it'll be good for you. Just I get off at 7 tonight. I need you out by then." So
Mm.
that was really
That's
nice
so
of them
nice.
for doing
Yes.
that. And they went over everything with me, telling me how that I'm taking a risk for being here. And,
Right.
and I said, well, I realize that, but I'm willing to do that
Yes.
because I had taken care of her all that time. And I had only one time while I was taking care of her, because what was crazy was I had got COVID sometime earlier than
Mm.
in the year, and she didn't get it. My wife didn't get it. And so when she had COVID and I was taking care of her, I only had like one night I went to sleep, and right before I went to sleep, I said I don't feel right. So I said in the morning I'll probably wake up and have COVID, but she'll be better and she can take care of me, or I'll have my daughter come. But I woke up next morning, I was fine. I didn't
Mm.
even get sick when I was taking care of her. So at the hospital, I sat there for from about 9 to 6:30 that evening. They finally
Mm.
came to me and said, "I need the head nurse. Like, I need you to disappear, basically." And I said, "Yes." I said, "Thank you for letting me be here.
Yeah.
I'll leave." And so that was the last time I got
Mm.
to see her. Um, but then that was on a Saturday, and then she passed away the following Wednesday.
Mm. Were you able to talk to her while
Yes.
she was passing?
Well, I was able to talk to her. Uh, we used to talk some, whenever she'd feel like it.
Yeah.
She wasn't on a ventilator, but she was on a very high oxygen. So it was a
Okay.
little hard for her to talk to me.
Right.
And so we would talk, we would text. And that morning, I was at a prayer meeting at 5:30 that morning, and she texted me and said, "I'm feeling a little anxious. I feel like I'm having a little bit of anxiety. Is there any, And I said, well, just calm down. We'll talk to the doctor as soon as I can, and I'll get back to you." Well, then so we did, and at noon, I forget exactly how we did. Some of it's kind of a blur. But at noon that day, I was texting her. I sent her. I think I even sent her a picture of. She loved eating that Panera bread, and
Oh,
I took
yeah.
a picture and sent it to her. What I said, "This is what I'm eating today," and it was. I basically ordered what she normally does because I just
Mm.
was, wanting to do that and let her know. And so everything seemed to be okay by then. She said she still feels a little anxiety, but she's doing better. And by 2:30 that day, I do construction, and
Okay.
so I was at the house I was building. I was there, and the doctor calls and says, we got to put your wife on a ventilator.
Mm.
And she had always said she didn't want to be on a ventilator. So I said, well, you need to let me talk to her. And he's like, you can't talk to her. I said, put the phone to
Yeah.
her ear and let me talk to her. I was very stern with it. And he goes, oh, well, whatever. And kind of, and I said, honey, are you okay with being on the ventilator? And she said, because he had told me she can't talk to me. And I said, well, I at least want her to hear me.
Yeah.
And so I said, are you okay? And she goes, yes, I want to be put on. I said, okay. I said, well, I love you. And then she said, I love you too. And and then I started praying over her and speaking life over her. And that was the last I talked to her.
Mm. Wow.
But then they called me that day or later on and said, you can come in, but we had to resuscitate her twice.
Mm.
And said, but you can come in. So I went in and got there, and I walk in, and the doctor's like, come here. And so he took me to a room, and by that time her cousin had showed up as well, and it took us into a room, and he said, we've had to do CPR on her twice, and he said, if we do it the third time, it won't work. And I looked at the doctor and I said, only God decides that. And then he said something else, and I said, look, only God decides that. And then finally he kind of mocked me a little bit, like, okay, well, whatever, if God decides, okay, fine, but she's not going to be okay if we have to do it again. And just as I was walking to the room, all the bells went off, the whistle, whatever they, all the,
Yeah.
they all went off, and they had to start CPR again. And that's one thing I wish I never had to see. Yeah, I know they have to do what they have to do. And they kept saying, it's not working, it's not working. And and this is one of the things I struggle with a little bit, because in my faith, in God, I was like, God really doesn't need that machine. Because they kept saying, it's not going to work, it's not going to work. And I finally was like, well, then just stop that. And I just was so convinced that she was going to be fine.
Mm.
And I was holding her hand and talking to her, and I felt the last pulse go up. I felt her last heartbeats.
Wow. Oh, and that's so heartbreaking, because
Yeah.
you really believed, and that's one of the things that I think a lot of us struggle with, is we believe they're
Yes,
going to be healed.
I know. And I remember asking God to give her complete healing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one thing he kind of later on, I kind of started thinking, well, she did get her complete
Yep, she
healing.
did.
And yeah,
Wow, that's so difficult. I am thankful you were able to be there. I've
yes,
heard a lot of people in COVID
right.
could not be with their
I
loved
know.
ones.
I was very blessed that I got to spend that day with her, and then
Yes.
I got to be there with her when she actually passed. Uh, I, I I felt bad because I could have picked up my son. He was at the house. He was a roofer, so he was home that day because it was raining. And I just flew by the house, never stopped in, because it's one of them things. But they came in later, and my
Yeah.
children were able to come. It was after she passed, but we were all there in the room. And then of course my pastor couldn't get in, but
Right.
they were all my pastor and quite a few friends were outside the hospital. When we got out as a family, they were there to support us and came home with us. And um,
So did
so,
that completely rock your faith, because you thought she was going to be healed? Like
uh,
what happened with your faith after that? Did it waver, or did you just, what was that like for you?
well, and let me back up just a little bit
Yeah.
about. So we had like even a prayer time outside the hospital with friends. A bunch of friends came. We had prayer right outside the hospital. My children and I, we would, excuse me.
It's
We
okay.
even drove around the hospital 7 times.
Oh.
And on the last time we hollered and praised the Lord, so COVID, you can't have her or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we were just, it was a one of those, journeys of faith that we were trying to walk out. And we're not trying to tell God what he has to do, but we were, we were outside the window with signs and have her look at it and say, hey, we love you, big signs, all that stuff. And
Wow.
because we couldn't go in. And that was the hardest part of the whole thing for her and
Yeah.
for us.
Oh, yeah.
But then as far as rocking my faith, yes. And I'm actually a pastor too, so
Okay.
uh, that that's kind of tough when you're. But it's helped me a lot in that, because my faith, I've told people, got put down all the way. It's like it got
Yeah.
put on the altar,
Yep.
and everything was burned off of it. That was just frills, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. And I had a little bit left over, but I so. I had no. If I can go to the funeral part of it,
Yeah.
the funeral was it. I don't know what people thought, but it lasted like over 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked out of there, Michelle, saying, and I told my children, I said, I think that was the most beautiful funeral I've ever been to. I know that sounds crazy, but it was the way, we honored her.
Yeah.
Uh, my family, her family, each got up and gave a tribute. My children got up and gave tribute. I got up and gave a tribute. I had wrote her a letter, so that, thinking I would be going first, maybe.
Mm.
And I wrote her a letter that she would have, and my daughter read that letter at the
Oh,
funeral,
wow.
that I had wrote for her. And my son wrote a song
Mm.
from the time she passed to the funeral, and him and a friend of his did worship music at the. He's a worship leader. They did worship at the funeral, and he sang the song he wrote for his mama,
Mm.
and it was called Jesus and Mama, and that was
Oh.
a really So anyway, then on from there, I had my brother was. Uh, he stayed down for like he was going to come down like 2 weeks later and do work at one of my jobs. He's in Indiana, but he was going to come down, and we'd hired their company to come to do a staircase for it, stairway,
Mm-hmm.
and so he was going to come down like 2 weeks later. So he stayed that whole time with me.
Oh,
Went with
that's
me
good.
grocery shopping for the first time. That my wife used to do all the grocery shopping,
Right.
so he went with me to do that. And as far as and then I never questioned that Twyla was in the hands of Jesus.
Right.
But so and you know how it is. The people that are listening know how it is, that when you're first, you wake up in the middle of the night and can't go back to sleep.
Yes, all the
And
time. Yeah.
so about every night at 2 o'clock, I'd wake up and I'd be, frustrated, wondering why God did this to me. Why don't I, and all that stuff. And I woke up at 2 o'clock one night. The next thing I knew, I was asleep, and
Mm.
I had this dream of her, and she told me, she said, I don't know why you had a funeral for me, and I said, well, your heart stopped, and that's what we do. And she
Mm-hmm.
said, no, but I'm so alive.
Oh, wow.
I am so alive. She was just very emphatic. She was a very bubbly person. She was so like emphatic. I am alive.
Wow.
And then I saw her walk up this trail. There's this tree and a bunch of children underneath it. And went up this trail up a hill.
Mm-hmm.
There was this small trail, and she was walking up there, and these children followed her up this trail. And then I
Wow.
woke up,
It's
and
beautiful.
the next day I was telling my sister about this dream, and she goes, John, you won't believe what happened. She said, I woke up at 2 o'clock, and I laid there and I was like, Lord, who do I need to pray for? Why am I
Mm.
awake? And and the Lord put me on her heart. She said, so she prayed for me that I would
Oh,
have a dream about Twyla that
wow.
that would tell me how alive she really is.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a
And
gift.
so God gave me those nuggets like that.
Yeah.
And one thing that I struggled with is being honest with God
Mm,
and being honest with myself.
yeah.
And so that's one thing I'd like to encourage everybody is be honest
Yes.
with God. Be honest with yourself. But uh, so I'd go to visit her gravesite like every Sunday morning. That's
Yeah.
just something that I did every Sunday morning, and it's just different thing, crying, all that stuff there.
Yeah.
And one morning I was just very honest with God, and because one of the things I used to say was every time she got a little bit sicker, I'd be like, "It's not a big deal because God can heal her." And every time there's gonna be this great testimony for him.
Right.
I'm gonna share this awesome testimony of how he healed her, and it's just more glory, more story for his glory. The lower she goes, the better the story, and that was kind of my way of
Yeah.
looking at it. And so sitting beside the grave one morning, I was like, God, you could have healed her, but you just messed
Yeah.
up.
Hmm.
And I said, there is no, I was going to give you a lot of glory. I was going to have a testimony for you. And now there's no glory for you because the story's messed up. There's no
Mm.
story. And I was, just bawling my eyes out. And just at that moment, I heard like this just peaceful voice said, but my name is Redeemer.
That's beautiful.
And I sat there for a little bit. It was so surreal. And I was like, yes, your name is Redeemer. And
Hmm.
I'm still going to give you this story for your glory.
Right.
And and the thing that happened with that is that's such a different voice than what I heard one other time. My wife and I, she loved a boat, and we
Mm.
had a boat, and she would go out. She loved, but that's about the only time I go out is when she said, "Honey, can we go on the boat?"
Yeah.
And or when we went camping, and so we went, and we'd often go or whatever. But anyway, that right soon after she passed, I uh, went out to winterize the boat because it was November, and I was on the boat, and all of a sudden it was just like almost an audible voice. It was like it's your fault your wife died. You don't deserve to live. There's a rope.
That is the voice of the enemy.
That was, and I jumped out of the boat, hollered no, and ran.
Wow.
And so what I'm comparing that to is that voice that I heard then was so different than the voice I
Yeah.
heard beside the grave that said, "But my name is Redeemer."
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's amazing.
And so I've had just a lot of those little. And this is another thing. My wife loved cardinals,
Mm.
and so that was one of her favorite. That and a hummingbird was her favorite. And we saw so many cardinals after that.
Wow.
Um, in fact, the very house I was in when I got the news that I had to leave, the first day back, there was a male and female cardinal trapped in the house,
Oh, wow.
and so I was able to open the door and get them, set them free or whatever. But they were sitting, in a window
Oh my goodness.
uh, in the house, and so it was just stories like that. Last Christmas, we heard a knock on the back door, so we went to see who's at the door.
Mm-hmm.
And here, a female cardinal had flown into the window, and it kind of knocked it a little bit
Wow.
funny, and it was sitting on our deck. And so I have a picture of me
That's
holding
amazing.
the cardinal because it was kind of couldn't it
Yeah.
could still sit there, but it wasn't quite. He just got his head
Yeah.
beat on the window when it flew in, and
That's
so I
amazing.
kissed it and then let it off into the bush, and and it took off. So.
Those are gifts from God. Like he gives
Yeah,
us those little God winks gifts,
he does.
whatever it is to just,
Right.
we had some moments like that too in the
Sure.
beginning. I love
Yeah.
that. So you were able to so you were at the graveside and you were talking about, all the stuff and he said, but I'm the Redeemer. And did
Hmm.
that help you to kind of let go of the, you didn't heal her? Like, how did you move forward?
Well, it was still. I wish I could say it was that simple.
Right. Yeah, it never is.
Yeah, uh, because I had a lot of regret, or uh, I felt guilt for, like, I could have done, if I'd have done a little different, if I'd have
Right.
took her to a doctor sooner, had I
Right.
done
We go through
things,
all that. Yes.
we go through
Mm-hmm.
all of that,
All the scenarios. Yep.
and trying to figure out, is God really sovereign? I never had a problem with thinking that until I went through this, and I had to concrete that in my mind again, that I know God is sovereign.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, because when I would, with the children, I made sure that they had counseling. I wanted to make sure they
Yeah.
had some counseling. I went to Grief Share,
Mm-hmm.
and my son and I went to Grief Share. We did that, but I just now recently started doing counseling, actually.
Good. Counseling's
So
so good.
yeah, so I probably should have done it sooner,
Mm-hmm.
but God has really been just building our faith through this, but it's been a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Been a journey,
So,
put it that
yes.
way.
So, how long has it been now since she passed away?
It's been 3 years and almost 2 months.
Wow. Okay. And
Yeah.
tell us a
Well,
little.
yeah, it's been, tomorrow will be, no, 2 days from now will be 2 months. 3 years
Three
and two
years and
months.
2 months. So
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are now. Like what has that been like? What was it like in the beginning? What is it like now? Just kind of summarize. I know it's kind of a big question, but like what the journey's been for you to where you are today, because the point, you're on this podcast sharing, that means you've had some healing. Like what has it
Right.
been like?
Uh, well, as far as but like before, you would like.
Like just kind of starting through, your journey after she dies, like what was life like in the very beginning, and then kind of what has helped you towards healing, and just anything you want to share
Okay.
about your journey to
Yeah.
where you are today.
Okay. Well, of course, at first there was a lot of, like I said, a lot of guilt, a lot of
Yes.
um, blaming myself for not doing.
Right.
So that was some of the things I had to deal with. Uh, Grocery shopping was
Right.
something that I just I didn't like. So I used to do grocery shopping on Monday, and it still is something that affects me. But I'd be in a grocery store just crying because
Mm-hmm.
trying to not let anybody see me, but
Right.
it's just hard for me to do things that she used to do.
Right. Yes.
And the last, I don't know, 10 years probably, she would stay at home, and she would,
Mm-hmm.
so coming home, I was okay when I finally went back to work. I was okay at work, but when I would turn to come home,
Right.
that's when would hit me, hit me the most. Um, but and the funny thing was, and I think probably other people can relate to this, but going to church was really hard.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very common. Yes.
Yeah, uh, I really didn't really want to be at church,
Right.
uh, but I knew I needed to be, because that was where we went to worship. That's where we, you
Yeah.
know, and it was just the songs. And one of the things that happened to me in my journey is, like, I didn't want to, when she was sick, I would listen to scripture or read scripture. I would listen to songs, but after that, I didn't want to listen to worship
Yeah.
music. So I didn't want to, church was hard. Um, I didn't know where to reach out to, really. It was kind of ironic, but a lot of the people that had went through this, lost a spouse, I was wondering where they were at. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to blame anybody for that. It's just that, but I
Right.
figured out later that when I had a friend of mine that passed away, his wife passed away, and I went to see him that day, I figured out why it's difficult. is
Why is
because
that?
there's so much stuff that comes back. You know
Yeah,
what I'm
it's
saying? And
true.
so it's a little tougher to reach out than what I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
And so um, I'm trying to think where I was going with that, but then what I was gonna say is, so I had struggled with wanting to read scripture, and I had a friend of mine said, John, whenever you're ready, I'd like to go with you through the book of Job.
Mm.
And I'm like, well, I don't. Here I've been, you know, I preached scripture. I went to the prison and talked to people about,
Right.
and with the inmates, trying to uh, help them through their grief that they're dealing with. And I thought I understood, but I didn't really. And so here, scripture was hard for me because all the promises that I would read were just hard for me to relate to because they didn't work for me. And so
Right.
the enemy tries to come in and tell you that it works for other people, but it's not good for you.
Yeah.
All this stuff,
Yep.
you deal with. And so this friend said, "Well, I'll go through the book of Job whenever you're ready." And so he was he wanted to do it remote. I mean, he was gonna so we would text one another. And so finally I said, okay, I'm ready. I'll listen. I was just going to listen to it. I said, I'll listen to 2 chapters a day. And so he said, okay, that's what I'll do too. And so we went through the book of Job for, 20 days or 21 days, whatever it takes. And a couple times I'd text him and I'd say, you know how Job is feeling today? That's how I'm feeling today.
Yeah.
And and the one thing that I found through that then that started helping me heal was Job. I always wondered why God didn't get on Job's case like he did on his friends, because some of the
Mm-hmm.
stuff I read about that Job was saying, I'm like, well, that's kind of, you
Yeah.
know, that's getting kind of asking God pretty hard questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found that, well, Job's heart was really towards God, and he didn't accuse God unjustly. And Job, when God didn't get on Job for asking questions, he just asked him 64 questions and said, where were you at when I did this? And the
Mm-hmm.
neat thing I saw in Job then is that at the end, he was like, you know what? Basically, paraphrasing, he said, I thought I knew who God was, but now I
Right.
really know him.
Right. True.
Yeah. And so that was kind of one of the things. So, and like when I'd wake up at night and couldn't sleep, I'd go on YouTube and there's these where they read scriptures kind of in a
Yes.
monotone,
Yes, I would
you
do
know.
that too.
Oh, did
Mm-hmm.
you? Okay.
Yep.
And so I would just listen to scripture like that.
Yep.
And then next thing I know, I'd fall asleep. Sometimes
Yes.
I'd be dreaming. Sometimes I'd dream that I was preaching, and it
Mm.
would be the very scripture I was listening
Oh, I
to.
love it.
And so it was think that's what started helped me heal
Right.
was scripture, and of
Mm.
course my friends and family that were. And the neat thing is, for 6 months, I either got a text, an email, a phone call, or somebody. If I was with somebody, they would ask me how I'm holding up.
That's good.
But for 6 months, every day, I got something like
Wow,
that.
that's amazing.
And so I have a very good friend group that would
Yeah.
check in with me, family, and I still have that happen occasionally where they'll be like, "Hey, I just thought about you today. Just want to check, make sure, see how you're holding up today." So,
That's good. Were there any specific verses or songs that helped you through your journey?
well, the one verse would have been Psalms 34:18, where it says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, saves those who
Yes.
have a crushed spirit." And that was one that I would be like, it says that, I believe that.
Yes, I love
And
that one.
so, and then Psalms 139 is a scripture that would kind of help me. And then a song that I really like is "The Battle Belongs to the Lord."
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
And so that's a song that, was really helpful.
Those are good. So
Yeah.
tell us about like what your life is like today,
What it's like today.
about 3 years
Okay.
later, 3 years, 2 months.
Okay. Um, Well, I'm uh, I'm still single, and uh, I haven't dated anybody, but I'm pastoring. I'm
Oh,
working, and yeah, I still have my moments.
yeah.
But I'm definitely doing better now. And now that I'm taking counseling, I'm starting to see things,
So good.
a little bit different. Um, and so, yeah, like I said, still have my moments.
Yeah, we
Just
all
the other
do.
day, I had one of them again, and and there's things that trigger me, and we all know how that is. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
What are your thoughts on dating again? Like, is that something you want to do, or
yeah, it's something
if God
that
brings you somebody?
right, and
Mm-hmm.
I pray about it.
Yeah.
And if God has somebody for me, which I welcome that. But
Yeah, always think it's best when God writes your love story, and
yeah,
especially after I don't know if you heard the recent podcast about like the dating scams.
oh, I did,
Yeah,
and
crazy, huh?
in fact, I kind of had something like that happen to me,
You did. Do you want to
similar.
share or no?
Well,
If you don't want to,
it
it's
was
okay.
yeah, it's fine. It was just it didn't last very long, and
Mm-hmm.
next thing I knew, this supposedly lady was trying to she wanted some money,
Of course, that's when you know
and
it's like no.
right, and I asked for a video call so I
Yeah,
could,
I could see if
see
it's real.
right. And she tried it, but it didn't work out, of course.
Uh-huh.
And so I kind of caught that on the same. I said, "Oh, that's the same thing." And so I all of a sudden she's got mad and told me a man like me doesn't deserve any
Oh
love
my
or anything like this and
goodness.
all this stuff, and I'm like, whoever it was, I don't know, it was a guy or girl,
Right.
I felt kind of dumb that it happened to me. But one thing I found out through it, the one was that maybe I can love again
Yeah.
because it felt good that somebody would say, "Well, how was your day?"
Right.
Uh, or good night or whatever. And
Right.
so I was like, well, maybe I can love again. And my children have blessed me to do that if
Mm.
if I so choose or somebody so it's just something I'm praying about,
Yeah,
and
that's
I
it.
pray for her, whoever she is,
That's right.
about every day. So
Yep.
uh, I don't know, I don't think we've met yet, or if I have, I haven't really noticed it. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Well, I think that's great to just be open to what God has for you. And
right.
also, thank you for sharing that because someone did comment on one of my things like, well, men get scammed too. And it's
I
true.
think that was me
Was that
actually
you?
that did
Okay. I'm
it.
like, someone
Yeah.
did. I just saw that. Okay. Yes. Like, it's true
Yeah,
that, that can happen as well. Like, men are
right,
vulnerable after being widowed also.
right.
But
And it
that's,
was one of those vulnerable moments for me.
yeah, but I'm glad
So
you like knew not to send any money. That's I would say the biggest red flag, which I know that our guest she stressed that in the episode is like don't
right,
like you need to meet them right away and they
right,
need do not send money. Like if someone
right.
asks you for money. In fact, one of Joel's friends has been scammed. And so Joel was telling him, like, once they ask for money, like, and he sent them money and all of the stuff. Joel's like, okay, when I was dating Michelle, she never asked for money. So that's a big red flag if a girl's asking you for money. And it's usually like
Right.
to buy a plane ticket or to do this, or like, I need money for my kids or anything they're asking you for money. Don't do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
No matter how much you think you know them, that's a
Yeah.
big red flag. Anyways, let's get back to your story. But that's yeah, just one of those things I've been well aware of lately. What advice would you give to a new widow, a brand new widow?
No. Well, one thing is give yourself grace.
Yes.
Um, and I guess and yeah, just don't be so hard on yourself because
Right.
it's just one of them things that's easy to do, and know that and friends mean well,
Yeah.
uh, even when they say dumb things.
Yep.
So you have to give them grace as well.
Yes, it's
And
true.
so I guess just not be so hard. Don't be hard on yourself when
Yeah.
you're feeling things. As like my counselor says, that emotions are not good or bad. They're just
Mm. Just
negative or positive maybe, but they're
mm.
not like they're not good or bad. They're not
That's
like
interesting.
just you
Yeah.
have this emotion. Don't be hard on yourself and say, "Oh, I shouldn't feel that."
Mm-hmm.
You feel it and then acknowledge it. You know that okay, this is what I feel. Doesn't mean it's just because you had a negative emotion doesn't mean it was bad. Is what he
Exactly.
would
That's
bring up.
really good
So
advice. It's
yeah.
very good. What has been the most challenging thing about being widowed?
Oh, well, one grocery shopping. I mentioned that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't like that. Just I mean, my son still lives here, but being lonely.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
you know, going to bed alone, waking up alone,
Yeah.
uh, and then the other thing is like, and especially like being a pastor, but even just not even if you don't include that, it's just like it's not having her beside me to,
Yeah.
some days I have I get frustrated about something at work or whatever, and I'm like, oh, I just, want to say something. I want to tell her,
Right,
and
exactly.
and so sometimes she'd be like, let me blow off, and she'd be like, well, did you think about it like this? It's
Mm-hmm.
just that part, and I can't tell you how many times. I'm sure you've had this happen. I can't tell you how many times I'd be like, oh, I can't wait to tell Twyla,
Oh yeah.
and then it'd be like, oh. I remember one time I was up on a roof and she used to be scared of heights, and so she didn't want me to be up on a roof either. And so I was like, oh, tonight when I get home, I'll tell her I was up on this roof or whatever. And it was just like, so it's so those things have just, it's just been a challenge. There's lots of things, but that's probably the main
Right.
thing.
Yeah, I remember this had happened like a month ago. So it's been 4.5 years
Yeah,
since Luke died. I'm remarried, but
right.
I went to go look at our old house where we used to live, which I have now moved out of after Luke died. And
Hmm.
I noticed it was just random, like that someone had turf instead of grass. And I immediately thought, oh, I got to tell Luke that those neighbors did turf. And then I'm like, what? Like, I even told Joel about it when I got home. I'm like, it was so weird. Like,
Yeah,
because I was in my old neighborhood where I used to talk to him and
sure.
it just made me feel like he was there. And it was a very strange feeling. And so I think that's something that kind of stays there, even if you do get
Mm.
remarried and all of that stuff. There'll be some things that you're like, oh, I wish I could, tell Twyla or I could tell Luke. Like,
Yeah,
it's
right.
just, and especially for me, I'm sure for you, it's things that have to do with our kids too
Sure.
that were like,
Mhm.
oh man, I
Yeah.
wish they were here.
Right. Well, and like with my grandson
Yes.
being born, my they adopted a little boy, and so as soon as I got to hold him, it was just newborn, sweet as can be, and yet I had this moment of grief
Oh,
that
I'm
I had to
sure.
walk through, and and he's a little over 1 years old now, and
Mm-hmm.
I still have this moment of grief when I get to talk to him on the phone and like I just wish she could be here to because she
Yeah.
loved babies. She's always cuddling a baby if she had a chance, and so
And maybe
yeah,
that's why you saw her with children in heaven, because
it
she
might
loves
be.
children.
Yeah, yeah, maybe so.
I think that's such a beautiful gift that you were given that dream. I 100% believe it's from God.
Yeah, I do
So,
too.
my counselor says that dreams and thoughts, but we'll focus on dreams right now. She says that all dreams are from God, self, or Satan. So, you have to go and be like, was that, so your dream, was that
Yeah,
from yourself? It could have been, but the way that someone prayed for you, was it Satan? No, God. I think
no, it
God
was
gave you that
definitely
dream.
yeah.
And
Well,
so,
yeah, I can give you another neat experience that
yeah.
happened is when we went. So the friends that we always went camping with, uh,
Mm-hmm.
that first year would have been right a year later because that was the last thing we did together was camping, and then got home and got sick, and then she passed. But so they wanted us to go camping again that year, and I was like, I don't think we're ready for that.
Yeah.
So, but I said we'll bring the boat and we'll come for the day, And so we took the boat, and I said, the first thing I'd like to do is me and the children go out on the water and just have a boat ride in memory of Mama. And
Mm.
so we did that. And so one of the things she would always do when we get out is say, everybody out of the boat, everybody in the water. She'd love to be in the
Mm.
water. She could just float for one time I think it was 45 minutes. She was just floating without a life jacket, and she loved it. And we were all out in the water, and I looked up in the cloud, and there was this heart-shaped cloud,
Oh, I love
and
it.
there was like a V, and then the top came across, and it was there for just moments. And I told the
Mm.
kids, look at the cloud, and it was perfect heart shape. But we didn't have a phone, we couldn't take a picture because we
Mm.
were in the water.
Yeah,
But we got to enjoy that moment.
that's
And then the neat
amazing.
thing was when we were getting ready to leave, I just got the boat out, was just getting ready to leave, and in our cove was a complete rainbow all the way from one side of the cove to the other side of the cove, and it stayed there for, I don't know, probably 5 minutes.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and that was
Oh,
one of the things I had to ask God for a couple things that I said I just need to see your presence. I mean, I don't doubt you.
right.
I just need something. And one thing I asked for was a rainbow. One thing was I asked for was I'd like to see cardinals. And then and and then the other thing was I'd like for somebody other than a friend of mine, just somebody I've never met,
Mm-hmm.
to tell me that it wasn't my fault.
Wow. What happened
And
with that?
then
I
what's that?
said, what happened with that? Did that
Well,
happen?
that's interesting. This is a very interesting story. And then the other thing I asked for was I'd like to see a white dove, and I got all four of them.
Wow.
And so I was in a prison because like I said, I go to prison
Yeah.
to at least once a year, several times a year actually. And I was sitting there talking with a man, and a guy came by and he goes, his name is Chris. And I was just kind of joking with him. I said, well, I can see that because I have a son, Chris, so I can see when a Chris shows up. And I was
Mm-hmm.
just kind of, trying to talk with him. And he looks at me and goes, when you're done talking with him, I have a word from the Lord for you.
Wow.
And so I said, okay, I'd love to hear this. He sits down in front of me and he puts his hands on my arms and just starts like, and there was an officer standing there, and the officer thought he was doing, like, I said, that's fine. He said, stop beating yourself up.
Wow.
The Lord said to stop beating yourself up. It wasn't your fault.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing.
And anyway, I just sat there. I said, this man has no idea
Right.
what he just did for me.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. And I got to see one night on the way home from work. There was a white dove that flew in front of
Mm.
my truck, and right in front of my truck went straight up in the air.
Wow.
And I literally went, I looked at it like that, all as far as I could. I was on the interstate, so I had to watch.
Yeah.
And
That's
needless to say, it
amazing.
rained in my truck after that.
But I think
But
that's just such a beautiful thing. God just gives us those gifts
right,
sometimes.
he does.
It
And it
just
wasn't that I doubted God, but
right.
yet I, it was tough to come back to the scriptures that have all these promises when you're like,
Right.
did it, so God, I think, graced me with that, just saying, I got you.
Yeah.
And and I've had a lot of friends that would just call me out of the blue, and when I'm having a really bad day, or text me and just say, Lord put you on my heart. I
Mm-hmm.
want you to know that He's got you.
That's amazing. And what I
Yeah,
think is really cool is you were in that place asking God, at the graveside, like, why didn't you heal her? All of this stuff. And he
right.
said, I'm a redeemer. And that's what he's doing right now. He's
Yeah,
using your
yeah,
story to touch people. We're like in 96 countries. There are people all over the
right.
world. So
Yeah,
he didn't choose to do it in the way that you wanted to
right.
heal her. didn't choose to heal Luke, but he is redeeming our stories because
Yes,
we are out
amen.
there sharing them and
That's
helping other
right.
people. I guarantee this episode is helping a lot of people right now. Just a lot of things that you've
Well,
shared. And
I give God the glory for that.
yeah,
And I would like to share one other story about
yes,
the
I'd
hospital,
love
if I
to
may.
hear it.
So I told my story about the hospital, about
Yeah,
how that I felt like they didn't take care of her.
yes.
I found out then that she had been sitting in the out there in the room, in the waiting room,
Mm-hmm.
from, it was 3:22, because I asked for the last thing that they did when they dismissed or discharged her. It was 3:32 in the morning, and I didn't get a phone call till 7:08 from
Mm.
her. Her phone was dead, so she couldn't call. And I was so angry
Yeah.
at that hospital, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I told my lawyer about it. The lawyer said, "Oh, we'll sue them." I had so many people say, "Oh, you need to sue them." And so I was this was probably 2 years later. Well, I'll go back to that. So I would work close. I worked close to that hospital, and every once in a while I'd have to drive by it. And I can't tell you the anger that came up in me. Just
Oh, I'm
like I
sure.
wanted to go beat somebody,
Yeah.
or worse. And I couldn't wait till I could drive by. And then when I get by, I just like, and so then I started praying. I said, Father, forgive them, for
Mm.
they don't know what they're doing. I just started speaking that over, and it started getting easier to drive by.
Yeah.
And so one night, my youngest son calls me and goes, "Dad, my car's acting up. I don't know what to do." I said, "Well, just pull in somewhere, and I'll come to there to fix it." And so I go. He told me where he's at. I think he gave me a pin. I can't went to it or whatever. And I was there for 3 hours, and I was like, all of a sudden, I was like, I'm in the hospital parking lot.
Wow.
That's where he pulled in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't feel this anger.
That's amazing.
And so I told that story to when I went into the prison to preach. I shared my story, and I talked about what happened at the hospital. And I had somebody come up to me. He said, "You need to sue that place so they know not to do that again." And that's the same thing I've been hearing from other people, from my lawyer, and different things. And I said, I just blurted this out. It just kind of came out. I said, well, maybe next time I'll preach about forgiveness.
Mm.
And so as I was preparing for the sermon for the next time, the Lord brought to my attention, said, when you forgive somebody, it doesn't mean that what they did was okay.
That's right.
It's just that you are releasing it to me
Mm.
to take care of it rather than you taking care of it. And he said, you can sue them if you want. Is basically what I heard from the Lord. He said, but you can either have, you can, and I'm not saying that suing is the hospital is never a thing that, I'm not
Yeah.
saying don't ever do, but this is my story, okay?
Right.
Uh, God's story, my story, whatever. But it was like, you can sue them if you'd like to, and it's okay. But if you really want peace and not bitterness, he said, just forgive them.
Mm.
And he said, just because they did wrong, uh, and you forgive them doesn't mean it's okay that what they did. And so as I was thinking about that and putting that in my sermon, I felt all of a sudden it's like the Lord brought to my attention, said, I would like for you to go in and talk with the hospital.
Mm.
And I was like, no, I
Yeah.
can't do this. And the Lord and I went around for a little bit about
Yeah.
it, and he just wouldn't let me go with it. And so I'd say, well, I'll do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow came, and I'd be like, well, that didn't work out. Maybe tomorrow I'll do it. I just kept doing that. And finally, one day, I found myself in the hospital parking lot, got out of my truck. I walked in the same doors that I brought her out of about 2 years. It took me 2 years and 1 month to be able to do this.
Mm.
So it's only been a little over a year now. And I walk in the hospital. The officer was like, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yes, I'd like to talk to the person in charge of the ER." And so I went in, I sat on the chair straight across from where she was at when I picked her up, and I just sat there. I had zero emotion about this.
Wow.
Michelle, it was amazing.
Yeah.
I wasn't all tore up about it. And I sat there for a while, and this lady walks out, and she goes, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yes." And I told her the story. And she kept telling me, said, "That should never have happened here at this hospital. It should never have happened." I don't know how many times she told me that. And I was like, I believe you. And I said, what happened? It wasn't right. But I said, today, I said, I've been encouraged to sue you for this. But I said, today, uh, I'm here to tell you I forgive you.
Wow.
And when I did that, she literally had tears dripping to the floor. And she said, I need to check into this. And I haven't heard back from her, and it's okay. But
Wow. It's amazing.
uh, I do believe that, uh, people had told me I need to sue so that they would not do it again, but so they'll, talk about it and not do it again. But I do believe they talked about it,
Yeah.
and
That's
probably in a different way than what if I would have sued them. But that's my story about that.
yeah. I mean, probably you offering forgiveness was more powerful than suing.
But yeah,
You know,
yeah, but
that's
I just so I would it's not easy to do.
right.
Uh, but God gives you the grace, and that's one of the things that's helped me in this past year a lot is that to be able to walk in that forgiveness and not hold it against.
That's amazing. Because there's probably a lot of people that have stories of someone that affected the loved one's
Sure.
loss, and it's someone or some situation that they need to forgive.
Yeah.
Because when we don't forgive, we're just poisoning ourselves, and um, we're stuck in this captivity. And so there's
Right.
probably people listening that needed to hear what you're sharing about forgiving, so that we can move forward.
Right.
And it's so powerful to forgive. I actually, and I've never shared this publicly, and I probably won't get in the whole story, but I had someone who, when I was a teenager, was really inappropriate to me. And a few years, or like right after Luke died, I mean, and he was an adult when I was a kid. A few years
Hmm.
after, I mean, months after Luke died, I was in this place where I was like really upset about it again. I was asking my counselor, why am I thinking about this again? I was a teenager. And she said, or it was my grief counselor,
Thanks
somebody
for
said,
listening to
Grace,
Widowed
like
Too
everything about our
Soon
grief
with
comes
Michelle
from
Bader
service.
Ebersole.
And
If you
I know
haven't
you really
already,
love this
please
podcast. So
like and
anyways, doing
subscribe,
that, that's
rate
why.
and
And so
review.
I ended
And
up
we'd
setting
also
up a
love for
meeting
you to
with my
join our
counselor
Widowed Too Soon
and
community
read him an
on
entire
Facebook.
letter about how
See you
these
next
actions when I was
time.
a teenager affected my whole life. And then I said, what you did is not okay, but I forgive you.
Yeah.
And he
There
had
you go. Yeah.
just tears streaming down his face. And he said, I wasn't expecting that. I said, can I pray for you? And it was like the most empowering, like freeing thing I've
Amen.
ever
Yes.
done, is to
Yeah.
face somebody who has done wrong and say it's not okay. Like, and I've tried to teach my kids that there's a difference. Like, for you, like you were saying, forgiveness. Like, it's not
Hmm.
okay, but I
Right.
forgive you, because we don't want it
Right.
to harbor that in our heart. And I feel like maybe there's somebody that needs to hear that today, that both the situations that we just shared, that
Right.
maybe they need to confront someone and say, what you did to me is not okay, but I forgive you. It might not even be about their spouse's death. It could be something completely different. I just feel
Completely
like
different. Yes.
this is like a theme that somebody needs to hear today,
Hmm.
is that forgiveness is so important to our own health.
Right. That's right.
Because
Yeah.
you could be holding this unforgiveness and they don't even know it.
Right.
It's
Yes.
so important. And like Jesus has forgiven us of huge things, and so we need to be
Yeah.
able to forgive others. Well, I really love your story. Thank you so much for opening up today about all of these things. And I'm loving what you're doing. Are you still doing the prison ministry?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah. In
great.
fact, this coming Sunday, my dad and my son and I are going to go in.
Oh,
So,
that's
uh,
awesome. I love
yeah.
that. One other thing, if you're on video on
Hmm.
Spotify, you can see this. Was there a picture behind you, maybe of Twyla or
Oh,
something?
yes. Yes.
Okay, could you hold
Yeah.
that up? It's kind of blurry on me, but I know we'll be able to see it better later. Oh, she's beautiful. Look at that
Yeah.
smile. She just looks
Yeah.
so kind.
She
And
is. Yeah.
I love
Yep.
that. Yeah, I was like, I think I
Yeah.
see a picture behind you. Oh, that's
Yeah,
so
that's right.
beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's oh, I love that.
I have something else here that if
Yeah,
you want to see
I
something,
do.
and this is so this when we came home from the hospital. Can you see that?
If you move it a little bit, yeah. Okay. Turn your, what does it say? Wounds into wisdom?
Right.
Okay. It's beautiful.
So this is her handwriting,
Oh, that's precious.
and so the night we came from home from the hospital, we were sitting with the pastor, and we were just kind of talking about the day and just trying to make sense of what's going
Yeah.
on. And as I was sitting there, I was like, told the children, I think Mama left us a note,
Mm.
and that was the note that she left.
Mm.
She wrote it sometime before, I don't know when it was,
I love
but
it.
she left it. So then we did something else. We got this made.
Oh, it's a big, for the
That's
people that can't see, it's like a big picture that says that in her handwriting.
right. Yeah.
Turn your wounds into wisdom. I like that saying. I'm going to write that down.
So she had got it from somewhere. I don't know where. So I don't know the original author of that, but she wrote it because of something she'd seen somewhere. And
That's
I just
so
thought it was neat
beautiful.
that, you know, I took it like a message that God had told her to give us.
Yes. Yes, I
And
love that.
so I see this a lot, and I'm trying to live by that,
Yeah, and that's
or
what you're
because
doing right now.
that's what she would want me to do is
Right.
to take what I've learned. And I told the children early on, I said, look, we can't help that this has happened. I said, but we have a choice in what we do with it.
Yep.
We can either become bitter or we can become better. And let's choose to become better,
Yeah, that's
because
beautiful.
that's really that's what God would want us to do. But that's really what Mama would want us to do, is to become better people.
Mm-hmm. And you
And
have,
so
I can see Jesus shining through you. It sounds like through your kids and just
yeah,
how you're taking this hard situation and letting God make beauty from ashes.
yeah,
And it's beautiful to see. So I'd love to close in prayer. I'm going to pray for you if
sure,
that's okay.
okay, sure,
God,
thank
I
you.
just thank you so much for John and for his willingness to be here and to let you be the redeemer and redeem his story. And it
Yes,
wasn't what he wanted in the beginning, just like all of us listening wanted our spouses to not die, but you had other
yes,
plans. And I just thank you that he's been able to accept that and been able
mm-hmm.
to just help other people. And I just pray for his prison ministry that you'll continue to use him there. I thank you for the gifts that you've given him with the person telling him that wasn't his fault and just all of those things and the way that I know that you're shining through him. We just pray peace and blessings over him and his family, and they have a really great Christmas season. And God, I pray for the listeners who are listening today that whatever brokenness they're feeling, that they will hand it to you and let you
Mm-hmm.
go into those cracks in their heart and heal in only
Yes,
the way that you can. And I'm just going along with the theme of forgiveness. I just thank you for forgiving us. And I just pray if there's any
yes,
listeners that need to forgive somebody or a situation or something, God, that they will right now just give it to you. I just see like
yes,
people handing over all of these things that have kept them captive for maybe years. And so we just pray
mm-hmm.
for their freedom. And it's for freedom that Christ has set us free. And so we thank you for that. And we just thank you for the way we have technology that this podcast can go literally all over the world. And I just pray for
Yes,
every person who's listening right now, because I know that they're not here by accident. And we just thank you for all you've done. Amen.
mm-hmm.
Well, if you've liked this podcast, give it a little Bing 5 stars on Apple Podcast, wherever you listen. If you yourself would like to be a guest, there's a link that you can apply in the show notes to be a guest. And please join actually, John, I'm not even sure you're part of this. I'm going to make sure you are. We have are you in our small Facebook group or not?
Uh, I don't think that's the one I'm in.
Okay, 62 people. No.
Okay,
Okay. So I'll make sure when we get off of this that you get
okay,
in that podcast. I mean, get in that group. So we have the big one. You can still join that. But if you're an actual podcast listener, we'd love for you to be part of that, because you can only get to it through me, through me
okay,
sending you a link. And so the big one is good. I see it right now as a ministry.
mm-hmm.
But the little one I love because I know everybody everybody's Christians and we are all podcast listeners. Everyone has this in common, that they listen to this podcast. And so I share a lot more in there. Like I'm way more open. Like I had a live video the other day about just feeling attacked with this other group, because I've got people in the other group, oh my goodness, telling me I'm doing it wrong and this and that, and I want to quit so many times. But the podcast, what I also like about the small group is I've asked people, hey, could you guys help me with the big group? Can you post positive? Let's turn this around. And so they've been able to do it. So anyways, listeners, if you'd like to be part of that, there's a link. You can send me a message. I will make sure you get in that group. And I think that's all I have for today. So thanks again, John, for being here.
You're welcome.
We really
Thank you.
appreciate it. And everybody
I
have a great
appreciate
day.
what you're doing.
Thanks.
All right. Have a blessed one.
Bye.
Bye.